I'm not proud of how long it took me to admit the truth. People like to think betrayal announces itself with fireworks. Slammed doors, lipstick on collars, mysterious receipts. But in my case, it started with something so small, so stupid, that I almost ignored it. A phone buzzing under a stack of printouts in a conference room. Not my phone, not the company's, not one I had ever seen in my boss's hands. I remember the moment too clearly. The building was mostly empty, the AC humming in that lonely after-hours way, the city beyond the glass fading into blue. I was finishing a report Marcus needed first thing tomorrow, which always meant he'd skim it at noon and take credit for it by 3. It wasn't resentment, just routine. Working for Marcus meant cleaning up the wake he left behind without ever being asked. That night, I finished my last correction, exhaled, and started gathering my things. That's when I heard it, a dull vibration against wood. One buzz, then another, then silence. I lifted the papers and saw a black phone. Cheap model. No case. No wallpaper. No notifications except the blinking call icon. I froze. Marcus didn't do cheap. Even his pens cost more than my weekly groceries. He also didn't forget things. Not phones, not keys, not anything that held leverage. And a phone like this screamed leverage. I should have walked it to his office, locked it in a drawer, and gone home. That's what the good employee in me, the dependable right-hand guy, would have done. Instead, I just held it. Maybe it was the hour. Maybe it was the gut-deep exhaustion of covering for a man who rewarded loyalty with more work and fewer answers. Maybe it was the way lately my life felt like a loop. Wake, fix, stay late, go home to a wife who had turned whisper soft with her words and steel hard with her distance. But the truth is simpler. Something in me already knew this phone wasn't meant to be found. I pressed the side button, no passcode, just a home screen with 4 contacts. Vendor 1, Vendor 2, Vendor 3, Vendor 4. That was it. No apps, no photos, no texts, no browser, a ghost device. A phone built to touch only a handful of people and leave no evidence afterward. My chest tightened. I shouldn't have explored further. I knew that. But when life gives you a crack in the wall you've been leaning against for years, you don't walk away. You look inside. I clicked Vendor 2. A number appeared. No name. Just digits. My thumb hovered over the call button, and my pulse thudded in my ears. I told myself it could be harmless. Maybe a contractor. Maybe someone helping with the expansion project Marcus was obsessed with. Maybe a vendor I had approved months ago and simply forgotten. But if that were true, why use a second phone? Another buzz cut through the silence. The screen lit again. Vendor 2 incoming call, they were calling him. At almost 10 p.m., my curiosity stopped being curiosity. It became dread with a heartbeat. Before I could talk myself out of it, I answered. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. And then I heard it. A voice, familiar, soft, a little rushed, like the caller was speaking while walking down a hallway or stepping outside somewhere quiet. Hey, you there? I got your message. Same arrangement for this month, or do you need me to adjust the invoice again? I didn't drop the phone, though my fingers went numb, because I knew that voice. I'd heard it laugh in my kitchen, whisper goodnight in the dark, complain about traffic, raid grocery lists, hum while brushing teeth. I knew it better than my own. And in that moment, hearing it through a phone I wasn't supposed to find, something deep, old, and solid inside me cracked clean in half. I didn't say a word, didn't ask anything, didn't demand explanations. I simply ended the call and stared at the reflection of my own stunned face in the black screen. The worst part wasn't that I recognized the voice. The worst part was that I already knew why she was calling Marcus's secret phone, and that meant my night was just beginning. Her name is Lauren, my wife. That was the thought looping in my head while I stood alone in the conference room, staring at the dark screen like it might change its mind if I waited long enough. Lauren. Vendor 2. I slid the phone into my pocket, grabbed my laptop bag with the wrong hand, and walked out of the building on autopilot. The elevator ride down felt too bright, too loud. I caught my reflection in the chrome doors, same tired face, same crooked tie, and wondered when exactly my life had shifted from busy to blind. Outside, the parking lot was half empty. My car sat where I'd left it, under a flickering light that made the paint look older than it was. I unlocked it, tossed my bag in, and just sat there for a while, hands on the steering wheel, engine off. It could still be nothing, I told myself. We'd talked about her picking up more freelance work. She'd complained about my hours, about how everything in our life seemed to orbit Marcus and the company. If you're going to give them all your time, she'd said more than once, at least let some of that money come back home. So maybe this was that. Maybe Marcus was giving her some side work. Maybe he'd been too lazy or too careful to run it through official channels. Maybe this secret phone was his way of keeping side deals separate from corporate. I almost believed it. But then I replayed her words in my head, exactly as I'd heard them. Same arrangement for this month, or do you need me to adjust the invoice again? That wasn't a new client trying to make rent. That was someone who knew the numbers could bend. I started the car and drove home. Our house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Lights on in the living room, TV glow flickering against the curtains. Inside, it smelled like garlic and something baked. Lauren had left a candle burning on the entry table, the one she bought to make the place feel less like a model home and more like us. She was on the couch, legs tucked under a blanket, laptop on her knees. She looked up and smiled, the practiced kind that never quite reached her eyes lately. "Hey," she said, "you're late?" "Yeah." "Marcus kept adding revisions," I answered, hanging my jacket. My voice sounded normal. That almost scared me more than anything. She closed her laptop halfway, like she wanted to look available but not interruptible. "I saved you some lasagna. Do you want me to heat it up?" "Thanks. I'm not that hungry." Her eyebrows flicked together for a second, then smoothed. "Long day? You could say that." I walked into the kitchen, pretending to check my phone so I didn't have to look at her. My hands knew where everything was without thinking. Plate, fridge, container. I went through the motions because stopping would mean thinking, and thinking would mean saying something, and I wasn't ready to hear myself say it yet. Lauren patted in behind me. "I got that client I told you about," she said, light, casual. "The one I mentioned last week? They signed the contract?" "What kind of work is it again?" I asked, back still turned. The question tasted like metal in my mouth. "Consulting," she replied quickly. "Brand strategy stuff. You know, it's not exciting." I turned around then. She was leaning against the counter, thumbs hooked in the pockets of the leggings she always wore at home. Hair twisted up, comfortable. Familiar, dangerous. "Local?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "The client. Are they local?" Yeah, sort of. We just meet online. Why?" She was smiling, but it was tight now. "Just curious," I said. "It's good news." Her shoulders loosened. "Well, it's going to help. I was thinking maybe we could finally redo that ugly tile in the bathroom." We. Help. Tile. Normal words, shaken like a cheap snow globe around the one fact I couldn't unhear. She had a contact name in my boss's burner phone, and that contact was her. I ate half the lasagna without tasting it. We watched a show I didn't process. She leaned her head on my shoulder at one point, and I let her, because pulling away would mean acknowledging the line that had just been drawn between us. When she fell asleep next to me around 11, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing. I wasn't ready to accuse her, but I was done giving her the benefit of the doubt, with nothing on my side except hope. The next morning, I took the phone out again before work. I'd brought it home, wrapped in a folder at the bottom of my bag, telling myself it was for safekeeping. If Marcus called, asking for it, I could say I'd found it and wanted to make sure it didn't disappear. That was the excuse. The truth was simpler. I needed to see more. In the gray light of morning, sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold, I turned it on and opened the call history. Vendor 2. Calls every few days. Always after 8 p.m. Always more than a few minutes long. No names in the log, just numbers. But I didn't need caller ID to know who picked up at 9:47 last Thursday. I'd been stuck at work that night, while she told me not to rush because she had stuff to finish anyway. My irritation stopped being vague and turned into something sharper, more focused. I checked the other contacts. Vendor 1, Vendor 3, Vendor 4. All with the same pattern. Irregular calls, mostly evenings and weekends. No texts, no shared photos, no apps. It was a device built for one thing. Talking to people you didn't want showing up on your main screen. I set it down and opened our shared bank account on my own phone. We'd always been pretty open with money. Joint account for bills and groceries. Separate credit cards for personal stuff. But nothing hidden. At least that's what I'd believed. The deposits were easy to find. A series of transfers over the last 6 months into Lauren's business account, each labeled with generic descriptors. Consulting fee, retainer, strategy session. The amounts weren't huge, but they weren't pocket change either. Enough to matter, enough to raise questions. And the timing lined up a little too neatly with a certain project at work. The one where Marcus had insisted on bringing in specialized external support and pushed hard for vendor approval without the usual paper trail. I felt my jaw clench. Ethan? Lauren's voice floated in from the hallway. You still here? I locked the phone and slipped it back into the folder. Yeah, just heading out. She appeared in the doorway, hair messes, wearing my old college t-shirt. She looked younger like that, softer, like the woman I'd married before we learned the shape of each other's stress. You okay? She asked. You're quiet. Just tired, I said. Marcus piled more on my plate. She made a face. He always does. You should tell him no sometime. I almost laughed, if she only knew. At the office, the irritation turned into something else when I opened our internal expense system. I typed in the code for the project Marcus had been using as his personal playground. There it was, Vendor 2, tucked into line items with vague descriptions, approved under his credentials. No physical address, no full company name. Just an invoice ID, an amount, and a note. Strategic consultation. External. On the surface, it was nothing special, but I knew the voice on the other end of that line. I knew her schedule, her habits, the way she glanced at me when she lied about small things. There was nothing innocent about this. Around noon, I walked down to accounting with a stack of unrelated forms, waited while the clerk printed something, and casually asked, Hey, do you guys ever vet Marcus's vendors? The external ones? She rolled her eyes. We're supposed to. But if it comes from him, it's basically rubber-stamped. Why? Just curious, I said. Some of them look light on detail. She snorted. Welcome to my week. On my way back to my desk, I caught my reflection in the dark window. Same shirt, same tie, same guy everyone relied on to keep things running. But something had shifted. I'd spent years trusting that if I just did my job, the people above me would at least be honest about theirs. Now I was staring at a setup where my boss and my wife were using that trust as cover. I wasn't blowing anything up, not yet. Anger is loud. Anger gets sloppy. And right then, I couldn't afford sloppy. That was the day I stopped assuming anybody was on my side just because they said they were. I opened a new folder on my computer, buried 3 directories deep where no one would casually click. I named it something boring enough for anyone to ignore. Inside, I dropped the first screenshots, the phone's contact list, the call log to Vendor 2, the timestamps. I backed up the project expense reports. I saved copies of the bank transfers with Lauren's business account circled in my head, if not yet on the screen. It wasn't a plan, not yet. It was something simpler and maybe more dangerous for them. I was done being the only one in the room who didn't know what was really going on, and I didn't know it then, but that quiet decision to stop looking away was the first step toward taking everything they'd built together and turning it back on them. By Monday morning, the folder on my laptop was no longer just a collection of screenshots. It had become something sharper, more deliberate. Evidence has a way of doing that, turning doubt into structure, fear into direction. I didn't wake up planning to destroy anyone. I woke up planning to survive. Still, as I walked into the office, Marcus already pacing near the glass wall of his corner room, something in me went cold enough to feel like purpose. He waved me over. "Ethan, big push this week. Client wants updated numbers by Friday. I'll need you running point on the vendor side." Vendor side. He actually said it. "Sure," I replied steady. "I'm already reviewing every file." He smiled like we were partners, not a man, and the knife he hadn't realized he'd handed to me. I sat at my desk, opened the locked folder, and started sorting. Call logs, invoices, expense approvals that didn't align with project timelines. Marcus had built a system he thought was invisible because he assumed no one around him looked too closely, especially not me. But this time, I wasn't the man he thought he'd trained. Around 10 a.m., I drafted an email to corporate compliance. Nothing emotional, just clean, factual sentences. "I've discovered discrepancies regarding an unregistered vendor tied to my department. Attached are relevant documents. Please advise on next steps." I attached a compressed folder. Not everything, not yet. And hit send. That should have terrified me. Instead, I felt the first breath of relief I'd taken in days. Because sometimes a man stops trying to be the hero. Sometimes he just stops protecting people who use his silence as cover. I went back to work like nothing had happened. Meetings, updates, spreadsheets. Around noon, a compliance officer emailed back, "Thank you, Ethan. We need to discuss this with you in person. Are you available tomorrow at 9? Available? I'd have moved a mountain." Marcus stopped by my cubicle an hour later, tapping the wall lightly with 2 fingers. His tell when he wanted something he hadn't earned. "You free tomorrow morning?" he asked. I turned in my chair. "Depends." "Good. I want us to run through our presentation for the expansion committee. They asked for an early session. I put you on the invite." There it was, the meeting he thought would showcase his leadership. "Sure," I told him. "I'll be ready." And I was, just not in the way he expected. That night, Lauren tried to kiss me when I got home, suddenly affectionate in a way that felt too much like an apology for something she hadn't admitted. I let her arms slide around me, felt her breath on my neck, and didn't react. She pulled back. "You okay? You're distant." "I'm thinking," I said. "About what?" I didn't answer. I didn't lie, either. Let silence do its job. She hated silence. It made her talk more than she meant to. I watched her over dinner, watched the nervous tap of her foot, the way she kept checking her phone face down on the table. She wasn't just hiding something. She was waiting for news. By 11 p.m., she said she was going to bed early. I waited until her breathing evened out before slipping out of the room with the burner phone in hand, double-checking every screenshot, every date. The invoices told a simple story. The calls told a deeper one. The timing told the truth. I slept maybe 2 hours before the alarm went off. Tuesday, Judgment Day. At 8:55, I walked into the conference room where the expansion committee meeting was supposedly being held. The glass walls reflected everything. The long table, the untouched water pitchers, Marcus at the front with his usual overconfident posture, adjusting his tie. "Right on time," he said. "They're running a bit late. Big day for us." "For us." I sat down. "Should be interesting." At 9:03, the door opened. HR stepped in first. Compliance next. Then the CFO. No expansion committee. No client presentation. Just reality. Marcus's smile faltered. Is there a scheduling mix-up?" The compliance officer pulled out a folder and placed it neatly on the table. "We're here to discuss Vendor 2, she said. Marcus blinked. Little flickers of confusion, then recognition, then the first hint of panic. "I don't understand," he tried. "We have reason to believe vendor funds were misallocated. the CFO said. Invoices were approved under your credentials with insufficient documentation. My heart should have been pounding. It wasn't. I felt strangely calm, watching the man who'd built his career on charm realize charm wasn't currency in this room. And we need to confirm the identity of the individual listed as vendor 2, the compliance officer continued. We have phone records. Marcus looked at me then, sharp and searching, like he could rewrite the narrative by finding the right expression. What is this? He asked me. I didn't blink. It's an audit. The officer opened the folder. Inside were the screenshots I'd sent. The contacts list, the call logs, the invoices. Marcus, she said, do you acknowledge using an unregistered personal device to communicate with this vendor? His throat bobbed. This is being blown out of proportion. So you deny improper activity? I'm saying, he snapped, that I don't need my integrity questioned by... He stopped, because the CFO had just slid a printed sheet across the table. Lauren's business account name, her taxpayer ID, her signature on submitted invoices. Every number matched a transfer from our department's budget. For a second, no one breathed. Do you recognize this vendor? The compliance officer asked. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. The silence became its own confession. When he finally spoke, it was frantic. Look, the work was real. She provided services. What services? HR asked. He didn't have an answer. And at that moment, I felt a quiet shift in the air. The kind that happens when the truth stops being a threat and becomes a fact. A small micro-catharsis rippled through me. For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't the smartest man in the room. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't in control. The compliance officer closed her folder. Marcus, we're placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately pending formal investigation. Security will escort you to gather personal items. He shot to his feet. This is absurd. Ethan, tell them. But I simply looked at him and said the only sentence that mattered. I told the truth. That's all. The crack in his expression was almost imperceptible, pride giving way to disbelief. Then security appeared at the door. He didn't fight. He just deflated. As he walked out, he glanced back once, eyes full of something halfway between betrayal and accusation. But I didn't feel guilty, not even a little, because he wasn't the only one who needed to answer for this. When I drove home early that afternoon, the house was quiet again. Lauren's laptop sat on the dining table, still logged into her email, messages with Marcus, her asking if everything was okay, him telling her to stay calm. They thought I was still in the dark. They thought I was the one being kept in the background, the one who'd find out last. But they were wrong. I closed the laptop gently. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. And now, for the first time, I knew exactly what had to happen next. Lauren came home around 6. I heard her keys before I heard her voice, a clatter that used to mean comfort, now sounding like someone else's rhythm invading my house. She stepped into the kitchen, saw me sitting at the table, and froze. You're home early, she said. Everything okay? I gestured toward her laptop on the table. We need to talk. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me, calculating the distance between what she hoped I knew and what she feared I'd found. Okay, she said slowly. About what? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply opened the folder, the one containing the invoices she'd signed, the amounts she'd collected. The call times matched to nights she'd told me she was working late, catching up, too tired to talk. I slid the first page across the table. She didn't touch it. What's this? She whispered. Vendor 2, I said. Color drained from her face, and for a second I saw something honest flash through her. Not guilt yet, not fear, but recognition. The kind that comes when the lie you've been living finally stops protecting you. Ethan, she murmured, I can explain. No, I said. You can't. She blinked. We weren't. It wasn't. I didn't. Don't rehearse it, I told her quietly. Not this time. She sank into the chair opposite me, hands trembling, eyes darting between the papers in my face, like she was choosing which version of reality to attempt first. It wasn't personal, she finally said. It was work. Then why the burner phone? I asked. Silence. Why the after-hours calls? Why hide the payments? Why lie about the client? I didn't lie, she protested weakly. I just didn't tell you everything. Which part? I asked. The money? The timing? Or that my boss had a secret contact name for you? She pressed her palms over her eyes. I never meant for this to get out of hand. It didn't get out of hand, I said. You put both hands on it. She flinched. I didn't enjoy saying it, but it was true. I thought I was helping, she whispered. We needed extra income. You're always working, always stressed. You weren't helping me, I said. You were helping Marcus, and he was helping himself. Something in her cracked then. Her voice collapsed into pleading. Ethan, please. This can still be fixed. We can go to therapy. I'll stop everything. I'll tell Marcus I'm done. He's already done, I said. Her breath hitched. What does that mean? He's under investigation, suspended, probably fired by tomorrow. She stared at me like the room had tilted. You told them? She whispered. I didn't tell them anything that wasn't already on your invoices, I replied. She opened her mouth to argue, then shut it, because there was nothing left to spin. The story had run out of places to twist. This will ruin me, she said softly. No, I said. This will end us. That's all. A long silence swallowed the room. Finally, she said, I never thought you'd leave. I know, I said. That was the problem. I stood up. My voice stayed calm, steady, not angry, just finished. I'm filing for divorce, I told her. You'll get the papers this week. I won't drag you through anything ugly, but I won't pretend this marriage is still alive. She stared at me with wet eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the instinct to reach across the table. Fix her, soothe her, rescue her from her own choices. That had never been my job. I'd just mistaken it for one. What do I do now? She asked. That's not my question anymore, I said. I walked past her to the hall closet, took out her overnight bag and placed it by the door. Not a threat, not punishment, just a boundary. You can stay until tomorrow morning, I said. After that, you should go to your sister's. Pack what you need. I'll arrange a time for the rest. Her tears fell onto the table, but I didn't turn back. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not out of anger, out of clarity. When I woke up, she was gone. A short note on the counter said she was staying with her sister for a while. No apology, no explanation, just distance. It was the first honest thing she'd done in months. The next week moved quickly. Paperwork, meetings with HR, a quiet conversation with legal. They thanked me for bringing the issue forward, assured me I wasn't at fault, and offered a voluntary transfer package. New department, cleaner environment, no shadow of Marcus over my work. I accepted. Marcus didn't return. Someone boxed up his office, and security wheeled it out through the service elevator, not the main hall. I didn't watch, but I heard the wheels and didn't look away. People talked. They always do. But no one asked me directly. Maybe they could tell from my expression that I wasn't carrying anger. I was carrying closure. Lauren emailed twice. Once to apologize. Once to say she didn't know who she was anymore. I responded only to the logistics. Property division, storage, forwarding address, nothing more. I owed her honesty, not comfort. The night the papers were finalized, I drove to my new apartment, a small place near the river. Quiet, clean, mine. I assembled a cheap bookshelf, cooked something simple, opened the windows, and listened to the kind of silence that doesn't demand anything from you. Peace doesn't announce itself, it just settles in and waits for you to notice. A few weeks later, I ran into an old coworker. He asked how I'd been doing. Better, I said. Lighter, he laughed. Sounds like you've finally stopped fixing everything. I nodded. I did, just the things that were actually mine. He didn't ask what that meant. I appreciated that. I still think about the burner phone sometimes. Not the device, not the calls, but the moment I found it. The way it forced me to stop being the last one to know. The way it showed me that protecting people who aren't protecting you isn't loyalty. It's self-abandonment dressed as patience. I don't do that anymore. These days, my life fits me the way a good jacket fits. Not tight, not heavy, just right. I work, I cook, I rest, I answer texts from people who mean their words. I buy things without hiding receipts. I sleep without rehearsing conversations I'll never have. I don't miss Marcus. I don't miss the marriage that was already gone before I realized it. And I don't regret picking up that phone. Some endings aren't tragedies. Some endings are escape routes you didn't know you needed. The day I heard my wife's voice on my boss's secret line was the day I stopped carrying both sides of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I walked away, closed the door, and for the first time in years, I didn't look back.